right, gender inequality, and I hope you could sort of have this class with an open mind. Nobody is blaming anyone. We could be talking about some sensitive issues, but what matters is that we all sort of approach this issue with an open mind. All right? Okay, gender inequality. So this is the lecture outline, introduction, briefly differences between sex and gender, and next is how do we measure gender inequality, and we'll be spending a lot of time talking about like how women in Korea lag behind men in practically every sphere of society. And lastly, why do we have such a sort of outstanding gender inequality? Outstanding meaning gender inequality in Korea is more extensive than elsewhere. Okay, so what are the reasons why that is happening? Okay, so first introduction. I want to show you some pictures. What do you think she's doing here? Oh, wow. So you guys are familiar with this picture. Well, she happened to be the first woman in the U.S. to run in an official marathon, and that happens to be Boston Marathon in 1967, when women were banned from running in a marathon. Okay, so she registered her name like a man's name, and she ran with her boyfriend here. So it was by accident that official noticed that she happened to be a woman. So this guy jumped off like a bus and tried to push her off. Okay, and this is in color. And so her boyfriend successfully intervened, and she was able to finish the marathon. Okay? So this is what he did. Okay? Anyway, women could not compete officially in U.S. marathons until 1971, and women were not allowed to compete in an Olympic marathon until 1984. Now, the question is, was this based on any fact that somehow marathon was not safe for women? Well, it's a question we safely or conveniently ask. But at the time, that was the reason why women were banned from competing in marathons, that marathons were not safe for women, all right? And the fact that was not based on any truth or any scientific fact shows you how we live in a world where a lot of what we know is socially constructed. Nothing about anything is inherently true or inherently factual. Okay? Pretty much what we know of anything is interpretation, is social construction. Okay? So one keyword you take away from today's class and look it up on your own is social construction. Okay? Social construction of reality. Okay? So that applies to so many things, race, gender, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, whatever you think or whatever you know. Pretty much, if you think, if something is not based on fact, then it is typically socially constructed. Okay? Society decides what its meanings are. Okay? And we sort of sometimes blindly accept those as facts or truth. Okay? Anyway, so it was not just marathons which discriminate against women in the past. In practically every sphere of society, women were consistently considered to be inferior to men, and their role in society was largely confined to traditional gender roles, which forced them to remain in the domestic or private sphere of society. From a global perspective, women today still face an array of daunting social problems, including poverty and violence. Of course, when it comes to poverty and violence, you may think that there's no gender at play, but women are more vulnerable, okay, to poverty and to violence. There's a severe lack of rights in many cultures and nations for women. There is discrimination in hiring and promotion. Forced marriage still happens in some cultures. Enslavement in sex industries, sex work or prostitution is legal only in a dozen countries or so. And yet, is there any country that does not have prostitution? No. So that means there is a constant demand for women in sex industries, so that's why they're trafficked. And it's really a tragic thing that still continues to this day, in this day and age. In many impoverished regions, women remain subordinate to men, a subordination that is often reinforced by religious and cultural norms. Well, it's so sad. I mean, it's so negative, right? But then we have to admit that there have been some positive changes as well, right? Can anyone mention something that has happened in the past half century or so where women have made some progress? Yes?
The passing of Title IX in the U.S.
Passing of? So what is that most specifically?
So Title IX is obviously fit in sports, but they have to have both women's and men's team in sports at universities.
Oh, I see. I don't know if that's general enough because I don't think we have that, let's say, in Korea.
Yeah.
Well, she's saying that in the U.S., is that from elementary up? Every school, at every level of education, schools have to have both girls and boys teams, okay, to be equal. Okay, anything else? Yes?
In most parts of the country now, women are allowed to vote.
Okay, so suffrage, right to vote is now almost universal, if not universal, okay? Well, in the interest of time, I'll make my questions very short and entertain just one or two answers because we could easily take 2 weeks of classes to actually fully devote ourselves to talking about gender inequality. But anyway, here are some positive changes. Positive changes include rates of literacy for females are increasing. Okay. Second, more girls are in school than ever before, and you'll find out later. We have data to show that girls are actually getting more tertiary education than boys, males, universally, globally speaking. Okay? Third, this is where the right to vote comes in, women's suffrage. Do you know which country introduced the world's first suffrage for women? Which country? New Zealand. When? Let's say it's 1868. The next question is, for how many women? Just kidding. It's a stupid joke, but nobody laughed. Maybe that's why it's a stupid joke. Anyway, you see the map here? New Zealand here, 1893 right here, okay? And at least on this map, the country introduced the latest, which took the longest to introduce or to allow women to vote is Saudi Arabia in 2011. Okay. Next is there are more women in government, right? Since 1995, the percentage of women in parliament has nearly doubled, according to UN Women. Fifth, more countries are creating laws to support gender equality. Okay? So, for example, over the past decade, reports from UN Women show that 131 countries have enacted over 274 legal and regulatory reforms in support of gender equality. Okay? If you get into specifics, there's just too many examples. Okay? From this preliminary and brief survey, what we can safely conclude is that despite massive political changes and economic progress in countries throughout the world, and despite the gains made by women, gender discrimination continues to limit the opportunities of women. And Korea is no exception. Okay? So, I don't think there is any country that is fully gender equal. So what we need to be aware of is the not difference of kind, but difference in degree. Okay, so Korea happens to be more male dominant than many other countries in the world, and so Korea does manifest itself as a very male dominant society. Okay. And we'll try to understand in what ways women in Korea lag behind men in what spheres. Okay? The question is again, in what ways are women in Korea discriminated? What are the cultural and social factors which account for the relatively more severe gender inequality in Korea? Okay? So we're going to address these two questions for the remainder of today's class. Now, let's briefly talk about the difference between sex and gender. And the next question, please, if you have heard it before, don't answer it. You answer it only if you're trying to figure it out. Okay? So I trust you with this. Because you're going to take the fun away if you answer it right away. Okay? But if you get the right answer by trying, by guessing, that's fine. Okay? So here we go. If man is a tree, what is woman? It's a philosophical question. If man is a tree, what is woman? Just tell me what comes to your mind right away. Don't think too hard. Anyone? Branch? Soil? Yeah. Roots? Soil. Or someone could say the sun, right? Or the rain. Everything that needs to be there for the tree to grow, right? But you know what the right answer is? If man is a tree, woman is also a tree. Isn't that beautiful? Okay? So if from this point on, you got to think that men and women are the same. But we've been socialized to think that men and women are different. So that's why you're thinking of all these different things, right? Now, there's another riddle. Again, if you know the answer from before, please hold on to your answer. Okay? You can tell me only if you're guessing. Okay? Here we go. A father and his son are in a car accident. The father dies at the scene and the son is rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, the surgeon looks at the boy and says, I cannot operate on this boy. He's my son. How can this be? Hmm? Okay, very good. You know, I think people who encounter these questions for the first time, they have a better success with the second question. I think because that's how we have changed. Our perception of like the jobs and occupations and how they tend to be either male dominant or male dominated or so. I think that has sort of become more softened, and I think it's a nice change. Okay, yes, the surgeon is the mother of the boy, or to be sort of be politically correct, it could also be the gay friend of the father, something like that, right? Anyway, as it is well known, biology differentiates the sexes, society differentiates male and female roles, and nature determines whether you're male or female, but it is society that gives significance to this distinction. Okay? So we're back to social construction. Okay? It is thus important to recognize that gender is a social concept. Okay? Our understanding of gender is socially constructed. There is nothing natural, normal, or accurate understanding of social phenomena, including that of gender, race, class, and inequality, as meaning and knowledge are socially created. Okay? Accordingly, social construction of gender means that there's nothing inherent or normal in our identity and behavior as men and women, that who we become as men and women is largely shaped by cultural and social expectations as well as socialization, that men and women have different identities and social roles due to this socially created division. So I hope you have, again, better appreciation for this idea of social construction of whatever, reality, identity, okay? All right, next is measuring gender inequality. Now, how do we measure or know the extent of gender inequality? So, for example, if the UN wants to measure the extent of gender inequality in Korea or China, what would they look at? How do we know gender inequality exists? So, because you got to have data, right? So what data can we have to prove that gender inequality in this country is worse than, that country or so? Anyone? Yeah?
You could look at like the difference in pay between men and women at the same job. So like we wouldn't get paid less than that.
Okay, so you look at the pay gap. Okay? Anything else? Was there a hand up?
I was going to say like the labor market, like this is why that allow people to
Anyway, something economic, all right? Economic participation or last call, one more. Okay. Well, let me tell you what these organizations look at by looking at two examples. Okay, one is what is called the Global Gender Gap Index by the World Economic Forum, and the next one is called the Glass Ceiling Index by the renowned, not renowned, but the most respected magazine, The Economist. Okay? So let's look at the first one here, Global Gender Gap Index, developed by the World Economic Forum. So I think right now is probably the most referenced, most referred to, most respected index, because it looks at the extent of gender equality or inequality of practically every country in the world by looking at 4 dimensions, and it releases the rank every year. Okay? So here we go. It looks at, first, economic participation and opportunity. So this is where they look at wage gap. Okay? They also look at the representation of females in management positions. Okay? So there you're already looking at 2 areas that are examined. Okay? Next is education attainment. So this is where they look at the proportion of women enrolling in tertiary education. Okay? Third is, now you know by now what the next 2 will be like, right? What 2 are you going to be looking at now? Anyone? If there is education economic, there's got to be something on politics, right? So, let's see. The third one is health, whether women have access to health. And they would also look at, for example, the mortality rate of women while giving birth, for example. Okay? So, anyway, next is political empowerment. So this is the proportion of women in parliament and also proportion of women in ministerial positions. Okay? So among the 4, this one has the widest gender gap. Okay? And of these 4, education would have the least gender gap, as you can see here. Okay? This is the education gap, 2020. You can see how at the elementary level, the enrollment rate is almost the same, 88 to 91. Okay? So that's, I don't know if you find that surprising. Well, it did took me by surprise, because I thought the difference would be bigger than that. Okay? What about at the middle school level? It's that same, 66%, globally speaking. Okay? At the secondary, junior high, middle school and high school. Okay? At the college level, women surpass the level of men. Okay? So as you can see, when they say that the education gap is the least among these 4 sort of spheres of measurement, you can see how education is one area that there is the least gender gap. Now this is the Korea's score from 2020. It ranked 108th out of 153 countries. So this looks bad for Korea, doesn't it? Okay? You think of Korea as being, let's say, better than that, right? And this is the countries which were ranked the top 10. Okay? And I think so there's no surprises except Nicaragua and Rwanda. The rest of the countries are all in Western Europe, like Iceland, Norway, Finland, Sweden. There's in New Zealand too. Ireland, Spain, and Germany. Okay? Now, the second index that I want to talk about is the Glass Ceiling Index by The Economist, and it measures the environment for working women, combining data on, among others, access to higher education, labor force participation, gender pay gap, childcare costs, maternity and paternity rights, representation in senior positions. So again, as you can see how between the two, there are overlapping elements that they look at, right? Like education, gender pay gap, labor force participation, access to education, right? But because this is more about the working conditions for women, they have something different, right? Like maternity and paternity rights and childcare costs, okay? Well, where does Korea rank? Last. And Korea has ranked last for the last decade or so. Okay? So this is Korea's individual score, and none of it looks good. Okay? No, this is not Korea's score. Sorry. Anyway, you see, this is the from 2019. Korea ranked last, and you want to see how Korea has fared in the last, let's say, 10 years? It looks very complex, okay? You see, for countries in the top here, you got to follow the line carefully so that you don't miss it, right? But you don't have that problem with Korea. Korea is right here. Okay? Straight last. You don't have to look hard. Just look at the last line or the bottom line, and it's there. And countries not doing so well also include Japan, Turkey, and I guess this is a surprise, Switzerland. I don't know why, but so even here, Iceland and Sweden, Norway, Finland, they're like doing really well. Okay? All in all, according to the gender gap report released by the World Economic Forum in July 2022, the global achievement rate of gender equality was only 68.1% out of 100. Okay? So, it says it'll take 132 years before the world will witness a full gender equality. 132 years, if the current trends continue. It's amazing, isn't it? We still have a long way to go, but that's a pretty good forecast if you compare that to this report. A UN report forecast it'll take 286 years, not 132 years of the forecast made by World Economic Forum, 132 years, and UN report 286 years. Now, if this is on the exam and I ask you to take sides and tell me why, no, don't worry, it will not happen. Anyway, the next part is the nature of gender inequality in Korea. And, well, do you know about any aspect of gender inequality in Korea? And you can use some example from your own country, or if you know about any gender inequality in whatever aspect, you could just simply apply that to Korea, and you may have a correct answer. Do you know of any aspect of gender inequality in Korea? I mean, one should just come right at you. From what we just talked about. Yes. Yes, very good. Pay gap. Right out. Number one, pay gap. What else? That's it? Pay gap? Yes. Glass ceiling. So let's say women face discrimination in promotion. That's two. Yes.
I was gonna say like that, when the woman marry the man, she becomes part of the family.
So when we look at these kinds of things, we look at things that could be quantifiable, data, right? So with that, I think what you're saying, may be true when we talk about gender inequality, but we're looking for something that could be substantiated with numbers. Okay? Thank you. Yes.
I actually have more of a question, but does the Korean government have mandatory maternity leave?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have one of the best in the world.
Okay.
Still no kids. Still no babies. For your information, USA is the only developed country in the whole world with no maternity rights or maternity leave. Sorry to pick on the US. Okay. Well, we'll see what I have. Out of many examples of gender inequality in Korea, today's lecture will focus on the following. 1, gender segregation in the labor force. 2nd, discrimination against women in hiring. Discrimination against women in promotion. Wide income gap between male and female workers. 5th, underrepresentation of women in politics. 6, women doing more unpaid household work. Okay? We're going to just focus on these 6. Okay? So let's see. Let's look at each one of these in greater detail. Gender segregation in the labor force. Now, is this universal or is this unique to Korea? Or are you not familiar with this idea? Gender segregation by labor force means this, that certain jobs are predominantly represented by one gender, like nursing, secretaries, okay? Now, for the men, it'll be construction, and so on, right? So that's universal, but again, the difference is not, what distinguishes Korea often is not that it is different in kind, but it is different in degree, okay? So it's simply more true in Korea. So here we go. A majority of working women in Korea are concentrated in the informal subcontracting sector, which means firms employing less than 5, small companies, and in the low-paying service sector. Okay? And right now, nearly 2/3 of all part-time irregular workers are women. Okay? So this may be true in other countries, but not necessarily so in other developed countries. Okay? And look at this. Korean women are particularly overrepresented in the following occupations, with their ratios hovering around 90%. Clerical jobs, administrative support positions, health assessment and treatment, registered nurses, dietitians, physicians' assistants, and what do you call those people who work at dental clinics, who do scaling? Okay, dental hygienist. I've been to many dental clinics. I still have not seen a single male dental hygienist. I don't know about in your country, but at least in Korea, I haven't seen one. Okay, and yes, now I see nurses, male nurses, and also, but I don't think I've seen any male aides who happen to be men. Retail sales, food service, and personal service, hairdressers, yes, there are now a lot of male hairdressers in Korea as well. Childcare, teacher assistants, and maybe even in the West, that's quite rare for males to be teachers' assistants, right? Similar trends are also found in most parts of the world, but differences of degree exist. And this is in European Union in 2018. As you can see, 97% builders, or should we say 97% of workers in construction, males. Drivers and mobile plant operators, 96% males. Metal workers, like welding, 96% males. Science and engineering technicians, 83% males. And science and engineering professionals, 74% males. But on the other hand, women, personal carers, 89% females, cleaners. Now in Korea, I don't think I've seen a male cleaner. I've seen male maintenance worker, but I don't think I've seen a male cleaner. Even at public washrooms where you see cleaners, all women. Even in doing work at men's washrooms. Office clerks, 80%. Health technicians, teachers. So again, in European Union, it's 78%, but in Korea, it'll be like 95. You know what I'm saying? So it's simply more pronounced in Korea. Korean men, on the other hand, comprise a large majority of physicians, professors, dentists, lawyers, accountants, scientists, and other high-paying and prestigious professionals. And other professions with high male concentration include clergy, political figures, and military leaders. And here is a very nice table. Look at this. I'm sure if you come from, let's say, the West, the female proportions for each one of these professions would be considerably higher. Okay? For Korea, it's about 25%. Okay? For physicians, dentists, doctors of Oriental medicine, legal experts, and professors. Okay? So I'm sure, if I'm not mistaken, like in North America, it would be close to 40% or nearly 50%, right? Second sort of sphere in which we see discrimination against women is the discrimination against women in hiring. Okay? So we'll look at this and take a break. Many feminists agree that the only way a woman can be truly liberated or can have hopes of achieving gender parity is through economic independence. But this is proven to be very difficult in Korea. Although the equal employment opportunity legislation has been enacted since 1987, companies, including well-known conglomerates such as Samsung, LG, and Hyundai, and public corporations continue to discriminate against women in hiring. Why? How do we know that women are discriminated in hiring? This is such an obvious, simple question. Someone please say it. Of course, you just look at the gender ratio of, sorry, you had your hand up. You just look at the gender ratio of new recruits or the overall employees. And what did I tell you about, well, do you remember how we have more female college graduates than males for the last, since like 2010? Okay? So let's say about 55% of females, or should I say about 55% of college graduates comprise women. 55%, 45%. So if we had gender parity in hiring, 55% or about 50% of employees should comprise females, right? But these are really sad data that I have to share with you, okay? And it's just a clear case of discrimination. Nothing else explains this, okay? Here we go. In 2015, a 2015 survey showed that women comprised only 23.4%. Okay? Again, more than 50% of college graduates comprise women, and yet from 2015 survey, only 23.4%. And now you may ask, why isn't the data more updated? I think there is some kind of a censorship. I cannot find more recent data on this. Okay, so don't think I'm being lazy. I try to find, but it's the only thing I can find are these. So these are from 2015, and this is for all employees. Okay, total number of workers and the ratio of female workers. You can see how, except for the Lotte, because it has a lot of department stores, other conglomerates, like 20%. Okay, so this is from 2015. And more recent survey is from 2017, and only 8% of all the employees comprised women. So again, these are the only data I could find. I cannot find more recent data. So there's some kind of a conspiracy going on right now, I think. Because everything else I could find so much data so easily, but not on this. Okay? So again, since 2009, college enrollment, so it's better to go with this. Since 2010, more female graduates from college than males. All right, let's take a break. So I'll see you back here at 6:10. Number of years in which these women served as heads of state. Okay, and Korea also had a female head of state for 4 years. And I'd like to ask you this question. This could be on the exam. Is the following a necessary condition for empowering women or for achieving greater gender equality? First, a woman being elected as head of state. Second, having a large number of females elected as lawmakers. Now, before I don't have time to ask you to give me an answer for this, but I just want to share with you this observation made by political scientists, okay? At least in developing countries. And maybe it's also true in developed countries. Now, at least in developing countries, and also in Korea, women who become politicians, who become lawmakers, tend to come from upper middle class background, meaning they come from well-to-do families. Like in Philippines, that's always the case. Now, do these women from well-to-do families, do they have more things in common with men from well-to-do families or women from poor families who need help from these female lawmakers? And I don't know if you know about the background of politicians in developing countries, but they tend to typically come from well-to-do families. And they share more things in common with men who have similar socioeconomic backgrounds. Or if you want to soften that stance, right? Do they fight for women's rights? A classic example is Korea. We had a female head of state. Did she ever do anything, say anything for the women's rights in Korea? No, she had no clue. She didn't care. She comes from a very well-to-do family, never had any care about women's issues. And I would say the same thing for the female heads of state in Bangladesh, especially Philippines. Why? Philippines' national politics is practically ruled by 10 large land-owning families. It's almost like taking turns who becomes president, except for the last one. Okay? But anyway, these women, again, just a thought, okay? Just to make you think about this. All right, next is women doing more unpaid household work. So here we go. I just have a data from 2016, but according to this study, Korean men spend just 45 minutes a day doing unpaid household work. Now, if you just look at 45 minutes a day, you go, wow, that's not bad. But if you look at the OECD average, it's only 1/3, less than 1/3 of OECD average. Now, in comparison to the OECD average, it looks bad. But what about in comparison to how much time women spend doing unpaid household work? So remember, Korean men, 45 minutes a day. Korean women spend a whopping 227 minutes a day doing unpaid household work. So how much more time is that? About 5 times more, right? So when men get home, what do? What do you think I do when I get home? I'm not a typical Korean man. I'm a very nice guy. I probably spend about 47 minutes. Just kidding. So as you can see, this is Korea. And so the key thing here is this blue dot on the left, because this is the amount of time men spend doing unpaid household work. Okay? And you always have to ask, why are women's work unpaid? Can you dream of a world where women's work at home is paid? It's not an impossibility, It's got to happen, right? Because you look at your mother. When you were young, what did she do for you? She worked as a counselor, because if you came home crying, she listened to you and she gave you advice. That's a work of a counselor. If she helped you with your homework, she worked as a teacher, right? And she worked as a cleaner. She worked as doing laundry, and it's just endless, right? And if you were to calculate all of that into amount of time and the kind of money that she could have earned doing the same work outside the home, wow, that's easily $30,000, $50,000 a year salary, okay? If not $100,000, right? Anyway, next is something controversial. Now, you've heard enough about how women in Korea are discriminated, right? Now, is it possible that if more women in Korea are victims of homicide, is that in any way related to the extent of gender inequality in Korea that exists? What do you think? Is there any relationship there, or just wacko coincidence? Wacko coincidence. Well, I'll give you some numbers, and you'll be amazed. All right. So, do you feel that Korea is a safe country or not? Anyone who felt differently? Very safe. You could walk practically anywhere, and feel safe to walk around, right? But so you can see how overall homicide rates in, let's say, Korea and South Korea, one of the lowest in the world. And look at this. This is the homicides per 100,000 in selected countries. Okay, this is from 2020. So the country with the least number of homicides per 100,000 population, that's how they look at homicide rate, is Singapore at 0.17, followed by Japan, 0.28. And where is Korea? Is ranked 7th, about 7th at 0.6. So you can see how Korea, you don't worry about someone running around with a gun like in the US. Oh, excuse me. But look at this. So despite the veneer of safety, Japan and Korea have the highest rate of female homicide victims in the world. How high? Look at this. Again, only 2 countries in the world have homicide victim rate of females at more than half of the total, as you can see in there, right? Now you can say, hey, it's only from 2011, right? Anyway, before I give you more updated numbers, in 2011, all right, do you think other Asian countries have similar victimization rate of females or something different? So again, I already said Korea and Japan are the only 2 countries in the whole world where more than half of the homicide victims happen to comprise women, right? Now look at some of the other countries. Well, this is the world average. World average is only 21.3%. That's world average. So you know there's something serious going on in Korea, right? That's the world average. What about in other Asian countries? Philippines, 12%. China, 21.9%. India, 40.8%. But Korea, 52%, right? 2011. And what about USA? 22.2%. UK, 29.7%. So just by looking at these numbers, aren't you shocked that more than 50% of homicide victims comprise women in Korea? Now that's 2011, and I have updated numbers for you. So the red line is female. The blue line, males. So you can see from 2012, the trend continued the same. In 2022, it was 50-50, but except for 2020 and 2011, 2021, we had more female victims than male victims of homicides. So nothing much has changed since 2011. Okay? So, we don't have time to talk about this, but the question again is this high rate of homicide victimization of females in any way related to the extent of gender inequality that exists in Korea? Yes? Oh, men. Yes. Men, usually ex-husbands, ex-boyfriends, current husbands, current boyfriends. So people they know. Okay? Yeah. Main reason is one of, like men not able to handle the breakup well. Okay. Again, it's usually ex-boyfriends, ex-husbands, current husbands and current boyfriends. Okay. So that's the importance of dating. Remember, we talked about this under divorce. But anyway, the last part is the explaining gender inequality in Korea. So before that, I want you to, so this is the second keyword I want you to look up. One was, what was the first one again? Social construction, right? Second one is intersectionality. And I think you'll find this useful in whatever term paper you get to write, okay? If it's about gender, it's about race, this one will come in handy, okay? So intersectionality simply refers to this idea that the phenomenon like racism, sexism, classism, they do not happen in isolation. They're all interconnected. Okay? Like this, the graph or figure. So if someone, let's say you're female, then you being a female cannot be thought of in isolation from other sort of things that define you. Okay? Your age, your class, your political view, your nationality, your sexual orientation, and so on. Okay? That's what intersectionality is all about. The question is, what are the cultural and social factors which account for the persistence of extensive gender inequality of Korea? To that question, I don't want you to talk about this. If this is on the final midterm exam, you should not talk about these, because these are in your textbooks that you've read back home. Okay? Explaining the persistence of gender inequality. You talk about physical sex differences, structural discrimination, gender socialization, gender stereotypes, lack of female role models, underrepresentation of women's work. These are given. These are obvious reasons. I want you to think about factors that are unique to Korea. When I say unique, I'm not saying that it only exists in Korea, but it may also exist elsewhere. But these are factors that are different from what you're used to, or at least, if you were to talk about the gender inequality in your home country, the factors that I'll be showing you here, some of them may also be applicable to your country, but some may not. Okay, so what would be, again, unique cultural and social factors of Korea which account for the persistence of gender inequality in Korea? Anyone? Anything? There's got to be at least one thing that comes to your mind. If you say that, I'll be very happy to make that person personally stirred Maxim coffee, pride of Korea. Have you had Maxim coffee? Whew. It's one hell of a mixed coffee. Number one. And we don't produce coffee beans, and yet we make one hell of a coffee mix, and it's called Maxim coffee. Anyone? Up for? Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I've heard before that like Confucianism made Korea have like some gender discrimination.
That was the answer I was looking for. And your name is? Julia. And you're up for personally stirred. You know, when I say personally, I use my own finger. Just kidding. It'll be too hot. So I hope I remember that next week. Yes, Confucianism it should just stand out, right? It just, what really, definitely a clear number one reason why Korea still is a very gender unequal society. Okay. Before moving on, anything? Well, I think the rest will be too sort of. I don't want to say difficult, but unless you are more familiar, you'll not be able to come up with these answers. But anyway, here are the rest of the factors. So the first is, again, Confucianism. Second, military culture, because we have military conscription only for men. And that tends to create this division between men and women. Okay? Third is Korean men. Okay? Well, you have men in your own country where they stand in the way of gender equality. No, they're better than Korean men. Anyway, number 4, women's indifference. Now, again, when I said, listen to everything with open mind, the point about this is this. Now, let me ask you, did women in the West achieve whatever level of gender equality with all of its shortcomings? Was it achieved through their struggle? Or was it given to them by men? What's the issue here? Well, what's the answer? Did they fight for it? Struggle for it? Or was everything they got given by men? Fought for it, right? Now, if everyone agrees with that, the point about number 4 is this. Are Korean women fighting enough for more equal rights? See, I'm not personally raising this question. It's the Korean feminists who say that. Okay? They're saying, maybe we're not doing enough. Okay? So that could be a factor. Next is female prostitution. Now, how could this be a factor? Isn't prostitution universal? But one difference is this. Female prostitution is more culturally accepted than elsewhere that I know. This is what I mean. Now, in your own country, throughout history, was prostitution looked down on, or was it accepted, culturally speaking? From what I know, at least because of Christian influence, it was looked down on. In Korea, it was not. It was something that man naturally did, especially aristocratic men. You know geisha in Japan? We have their counterparts, giseng, in Korea. And who did these giseng cater to? Aristocratic men. And we have this romantic idea of geisha as being instrumental, good at singing, good with instrument, and well, whatever they did, they were doing that to entertain men. And why did they learn to play an instrument? Because we didn't have karaoke machine then. So, what did they ultimately do at the end of the day? They did sex work. And who did these women come from? Did they come from a high class, well-to-do families? At least in the case of Korea, they came from slave class. So do you think they were like, oh, please, sir, I don't want to... You think they had the right to say that? But in the history books of Korea, they all say nice things. Oh, these women were good in poetry. They, play instruments. They sang well. Again, who wrote these history documents? Was it women or men? Did they write these to justify what they did or just to reveal something really terrible? You see, history books are written by victors. And throughout history, the victors have been men. And at least in Korea, they justified what they did by saying things nice about these giseng. Okay? But in fact, they were sex workers who had no right to say no because they came from slave class. Okay? So in the history books, you know what it says? Oh, some giseng had no sex. Again, that's what they write, what they wrote. But is that true? Of course not. Okay? Korea was not a society that, respected human rights, 500 years ago. But if you read the book, history documents, it reads as if we respected human rights. Okay? So anyway, that's female prostitution, and that continues to this day, where prostitution is illegal, but you don't see like police like strictly reinforcing the law. Okay, so that's why it's there, and you could put a question mark there too. Okay, and the last one is burden of oppression from outside, foreign invasion and occupation. Yeah. It's illegal, but it's not strictly reinforced. So please like sort of look the other way. We still have brothels, believe it or not. We had hundreds of brothels before, but now it's down to 14. Can you imagine a brothel and police just walk by? Okay? And it's illegal. Okay? I'm not going to say what proportion of men have ever paid paid money for sex, but it's quite high. And I know like countries like Germany has legalized prostitution, but if you look at the proportion of men who have ever paid money for sex, it stands at about 10 to 15%. But in Korea, without saying the specific numbers, it's considerably higher. Okay? And the thing about why the cultural acceptance of prostitution is a problem is this. When you become sort of fixated on frequenting sex workers, is that you develop this perception of women as sex objects. Okay? So that's the problem also with pornography, right? That if you are into this kind of a pornography thing, you subconsciously, unconsciously develop this idea of women being sex object only. Okay? So that's why feminists abhor, the existence of pornography and prostitution. Anyway, the last one is burden of oppression from outside. Now, if you know Korean history, Korea had been invaded numerous times, just too many to actually give a number. And on few occasions, they occupied Korea for like decades. Okay, Mongolia did that, China did that, Japan did that. Now, when there is a war, when there is a battle, the immediate loser is the men, right? But if foreign forces stay in, let's say, Korea for like a few decades, who are the ultimate losers? Or I shouldn't say losers, but victims. They're women. So women became victims because Korean men could not protect them. Now, when the foreigners left, what did Korean men do? Did they embrace these victims and said, "Oh, I'm sorry that we couldn't protect you"? Or did they shun them, ostracize them? The latter happened. Even the wives of noblemen who were raped, who had babies, they were shunned by their families. Never taken back. And what about after the World War II? When 200,000, up to 200,000 comfort women were taken overseas. When they came back, were they received warmly by the society and by the families? No, they were also shunned, ostracized. So our society as a whole blamed the victims. And because they were seen as non-Korean for submitting to these foreigners, they became un-Korean. And they became sort of objects of sort of, I don't want to say ridicule, but sort of, they were totally looked down on. Okay? So again, so these women, sort of women as a whole, were given this idea that they are victims of their own accord, kind of, right? Not so. They were like blamed for not being able to protect themselves or to protect their chastity. Okay, so that is something. I don't know if it makes sense to you, where sort of Korea. So this is from a Korean men's perspective, right? Because women were victimized sexually, and that made them unworthy of sort of being members of this Korean community. Okay, and women were, as a whole, were put in the same sort of a category of being sort of, you know, sort of easy victims of foreign forces. All right. Now, do you have any questions about these factors? Now, this is just one thing I want to get back to, military culture, right? Because we have, again, conscription only for men for 18 months now, okay? And the same does not apply to women. So men consider the military duty as a sacred obligation because they're the only one who do it. So among men, they develop this sense of camaraderie, right? And they develop this uneasy feeling toward women who have it easy. Because again, I'm not taking sides here because I'm just giving you what's out there. Okay? Imagine a man who serves in the army for 18 months. It works out to like 2 years, right? Because many men go to the army during the college years. Okay, so you do the take leave of absence and whatever. It usually works out to 2 years or 2.5 years. You finish your military service, you finish your degree, you get a job, and the woman who was your classmate has already 2 years of job experience and is earning more money than you. How would you feel if you happen to be a man? You see? So that's why there is this military culture sort of. So, I mean, USA has a military culture too, right? Probably the strongest military culture in the world. And yet, society does so many things to take care of these military personnel. But in Korea, by law, men who serve in the army, they cannot be given any special treatment because feminist women groups have taken this to constitutional court and they won. Because before, men serving in the army received extra 2 points when they applied for civil service position. But the women took this issue to constitutional court and they won in 1999. And that still stands. That's why if you go to the internet talk community, there's so much hatred that is expressed by Korean men. That's why there's a call for military service for both males and females. Okay, like in Israel. I don't know where else they have a military conscription for both sexes, but I think I think it'll receive more attention in the near future. And we have a military conscription because, as you know, the North Korean existence, right? Anyway, it's near 7 o'clock. Do you have any questions about the whole gender inequality issue? All right, next week's topic is what? Education? Is it? Well, so more exciting topic next week, all right? So thank you. See you next week.